Well, welcome again. I'm so delightful to have you. It's so delighted to have you all here. It's an honor to share this time with three fellow authors whose books are terrific in very different genres. I'm going to do a brief introduction of them, and then I have some questions, but if you have questions, just type them into the chat. I am just checking to make sure we've got everything set, and I think we do. So I will start it off with a, just bear with me one second, with a brief introduction of our four authors, and then ask them to talk a little bit about how they got started writing and what makes them do this crazy thing for hours on end. So I'll begin with Bob Katz. Bob, wave so everyone knows who you are. There he is the author of several acclaimed books, including the novel Third and Long, which was winner of the 2011 Independent Book Publishers Association Fiction Award. Say that 4 times fast. And 4 other books, plus articles in the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, and Sports Illustrated. Third and Long, here it is. Our second guest here is Linda Habib, who released her debut novel Against the Glass to both critical acclaim, and it hit #1 on Amazon for women's historical fiction this summer. Among the many roles she's embraced in her 33-year career as an educator, she was an English department chair and assistant principal at one of the largest schools in the Bronx with 5,600 students.
Wow. And I'm still breathing.
That's pretty good. And Stephen Maier, wave Stephen so they know who you are. Against the Glass. Stephen has spent his career mostly in the art business, and it's the father for his best-selling memoir, Gallery Confidential. From selling Freddie the Freeloader clown reproductions by Red Skelton with Red Skelton for a few $100s to an original Matisse oil on canvas for millions of dollars. Wow. His 50 years in the art business has been full of surprises and delicious stories. So we'll want to hear from them. So to get us kicked off here, Bob, why don't you answer the question how you got started writing and what keeps you writing?
The second part of that question is the hardest, so I'm glad that the first part came first. What started me writing? I've always dabbled. I've always thought of myself, if not as a writer, as a would-be writer. Something that made quite an impression on me years ago was I heard a lecture by a very accomplished novelist named E.L. Doctorow. Do people know him?
Yes.
Very skilled, winner of, I believe, the Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award, etc. I heard him give a lecture once about his career, and he had a line that resonated with me and prodded me, and it was this. He said that up until a certain age, I believe it was his early 20s, he had been so sure that he was a writer that he had never felt the need to actually write anything.
That's a good way out. That's so funny.
And I said that, I don't remember exactly when I heard that, but hearing it did resonate with me, and it was very much how I thought of myself. And in around that same time period, I had time in at least a fragment of an idea, and kind of said to myself, now or never, and that was decades ago. So, you know, it's
Well,
Not a
good.
spectacular launch, but a launch.
Well, we'll take that. A great story. Linda, how about you? What made you write that Against the Glass?
Well, I don't know what exactly made me write that, but it seems I observe things, and I've been collecting ideas and impressions and images, notes. I've taken so many writing classes. I've met so many authors at the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan and other places. I mean, I just run into authors and we talk about writing. And I eventually took lots of writing classes and learned to write. But it was my interest in women's place in the world and my own place in a kind of transitional time for women, which was the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. So I wanted to make sense of it all. So that was my goal, to make sense of all of that.
Well,
And use what I learned from the writers I had interacted with. I guess that's basically it.
and you did it, which is great.
I did it, which is amazing.
How about you, Stephen? What made you decide to do this crazy thing after all your experiences?
Really, COVID-19 was the impetus. I was holed up, and I thought, I've been working 40, 50, 60-hour weeks for years and years, and I thought, it would be a good time. Actually, a friend of mine, who some of you may know, Don Herzler, had written some books, and I wrote him a short story about some mutual friends of ours, and he said, you should write a book. And I just wrote back very terse, LOL. I had no intention of doing that. And then about a week later, I thought, I've got an idea for another story. And all of a sudden, the story started coming out. When I was in college, a professor had said to me after I wrote a story, you're going to be the next Bret Hart. Well, I had to go home and look up who Bret Hart was, because I didn't even know who he was, but he was a short story writer of some import. And I've always been interested in writing. I always, waxed long about letters, and I was always the writer for biographies of artists and that sort of thing. So I just thought it'd be fun to do it. So I did it, and it was a mistake.
And I will tell you, Stephen has a wicked sense of humor, which comes out in his 1001 stories, actually 101 anyway. And I will just share two quick things that I wrote poetry as a kid, and it was actually sort of dark, I guess, as a teenager. It was my adolescent way of expressing myself, and a circuitous route through business and law school. And I think about at least half the people I know have a book in them. I mean, you meet a lot of people as an author who say, I'm going to write a book, or I thought of writing a book. And what actually tips the scale to make you do it? Two things for me. One is we had some good friends, and the husband is a very successful businessman, and his wife, Dottie, was didn't work, did a lot of volunteer work, wonderful personality, but didn't seem like a very focused individual. And one day she said to us, I'm going to write a book. And we all went, yeah, Dottie's going to write a book. Well, a year later, she wrote this book called Sullivan's Island, which is about where she grew up and her family and the women in her family. It hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It was translated into 26 languages. It was #1 in Russia, of all things. And she's written maybe 15 books since then. But I said, if Dottie can do it, I can do it. And I had an idea for a book that took me a while. Like many authors, I was talking to Carol this morning about, it took me 10 years to write my first book. Carol, it took her 5 years to write Seduction. Then every book came much faster after that. All right, so let me ask you this question, and this now goes to any of you. We're not, we're going to sort of take it at random, but the question is, how do you come up with your characters? Anyone want to take that?
I bump into them.
Well, yours are real life, Stephen, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I think we probably all take our characters somewhat from real life or people we know or thought of. Bob, you have an interesting background to your Nick Grimke. Can you tell us where he came from?
Well, yeah, and just to circle into that, so I've written a few novels and they have nothing in common or very little in common with each other, which makes it hard for me to give a general answer to that question. The specific, so the novel Third and Long, which is the one that I am currently actively promoting, and the cover of which Charlie was waving in front of you a few minutes ago, comes from the kernel of it is a true story. That was a brief news item, 12 years ago when I learned about it, and the two or three characters that are at the center of my novel were the types that appeared in the news item from which I extrapolated. So I would say I invented their personality characteristics, but to the plot that emanates from them is what I read about, and their role in the plot is what I learned from this journalistic account of it. So, yeah, I don't consider it to be, I consider it to the personality, the characteristics of the characters are imagined and invented, but the whole setup was given to me by a news account.
And just to give you a short on that Nick Grimke is a stranger who shows up on a train with a mysterious past, who has a transformative effect on a Midwestern town that's going through kind of the Rust Belt challenges of the time, right? Is that a fair?
That's very eloquent. Yes, I wish you had said it louder, but that's perfect.
Oh, I'll make sure I'm a little louder.
No, I'm just kidding.
I
might say, if people would be interested, so my background, and I don't mean to filibuster here, a bad word these days, that my background is in journalism. And when I read about this account, I went and sought the person who was at the center of it to interview him and learned more detail that way. So,
yeah.
Without thinking, I'd never write a novel about it.
Which actually leads to my second question. And this is something that people, when I've been in front of an audience, seem to have a real interest in. And that is, and I'd ask each of you to answer this one, is give us one example of some piece of interesting research that you have done in your writing. And I'll start that one off with, there are some writers, or you'll hear this saying that people say, if you're going to write what you know. Well, I like to write what I want to know, which means if there's a subject I'm interested in, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm going to write to research it. And I've gone out and interviewed psychiatrists, psychologists about multiple personality disorder. I've gone on expeditions to our favorite pizza place in Brooklyn. I've had karate demonstrations. I've spoken with chemical weapons experts. But one of the more interesting ones was something I did before I wrote that worked its way into my most recent novel. I didn't show mine, which is Still Not Dead. And that is, I had the opportunity to spend 3 days on a nuclear submarine, the USS Nebraska. And it was quite an experience because we went 100 miles out to sea and we boarded this submarine that is the length of 2 football fields, not like the World War II movies. There was a lot of room. And it had 24 live nuclear warheads on the submarine. And we spent 3 days there. We got to go down 600 feet, and I slept in triple bunks between the nuclear silos. So it was quite an experience, and it worked its way into my latest book. So any of you guys, you want to add your experience?
Well, I'll speak up. I like to go places. I like to visit. I went to Paris. I went to Florence, and I pick up little trinkets and mementos, coins, and just gather things, and then eventually decide how I'm going to use them. And I also try to collect material, primary sources. And this is a book I mentioned in my book, and it's called Ovum Humanum by Landrum Shettles. And it contains the very first picture ever taken under a microscope of fertilization. And it's a very well-known book, very tiny. And I was surprised I was able to get a copy of it. And I spent time at the Ritz, and I got this little book, The Cocktails of the Ritz Paris, where I met one of my characters and put him into the novel. And that's going to be my trivia question later. And it's a lot of fun to work like that, you know, and just gather all these things and then decide, what am I going to do with all these things, considering the theme I was trying to work on.
Great. Stephen, Bob, do you have one?
Well, I just say I plumbed the depths of my shallow memory and try to fact check to the extent that I can. And, you know, honestly, I really appreciate the fact that I'm sharing this with what I would call real authors. I wrote a book. I've written a lot of short stories and a lot of, letters to the editor, that sort of thing. And I would just say that, like I don't really do a lot of research.
I'll chime in. The novel Third and Long, a big part of it is set in a small town textile factory, and wanted to learn more about the look and feel and smell of those places. And there are not many left in North America, but I did find one, and was, after having promised that I was not an investigative reporter, was allowed in to walk around.
That's pretty good. And I got a question in the chat. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I encourage you to put some questions in there, because I'm going to ask those for which our authors are not prepared, but I'm sure they can improvise quite well. And the question from Tanya is, what are you working on now?
I can answer.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Stephen. I'll take it away.
I'm working on writing songs and poetry, and that's about it. And I, try to discipline myself to do it every day, even if I don't have good ideas, and then go back and rework it.
Yes, Bob.
I'm just, this week, I would say I'm finishing a novel I've been working on and off on for quite a long time, set in, I heard someone say they're from Cambridge, set in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the early 1970s, with a plot and characters that are at least partially invented. And that'll be good to go soon. As to good to go where, don't ask me that.
You have a working title?
The working title is Casa Roja.
Interesting. And I have started on the sequel to my Still Not Dead. I think I have a really kernel of a very good idea. as those of you who might have read one or more of my books, they have a basis in technology that's around now, that's present, but most people don't know about, some of which is kind of scary. It seems that progressively through my books, I've introduced things that are possible in the future or being developed. And I read an article in Forbes that was titled, "The Multiverse Must Exist." And that prompted my next, oh, what does that mean? And the theory is that there are an infinite number of parallel universes to ours. By the way, this is accepted by a number of astrophysicists. This is not whack-a-mole. And there are so many that there's a good chance that there is a doppelganger of you in one or more of these infinitely replicated universes. So I explore what that might mean, especially if you got a chance to meet that doppelganger.
I've got a doppelganger.
All right, let me go on to.
What I'm working on.
Yes, go ahead, Linda.
So I'll just quickly say, because it's not fully formed yet, I'm just collecting images and visions and material for another women's fiction, not historical, very contemporary, on the criminal justice system.
Oh,
So, and one of my characters will be working to help the criminals. Well, but they're not really criminals. They've been called criminals, but they're really, good people.
Oh, okay, good. Another question. Can you share with us an example of one mistake you've made in your writing that you wish you could take back or do over?
Oh, I already took it back.
What was that?
I made two mistakes. Well, I made many mistakes, but because I let many people read portions of my manuscript before I submitted it even to Tanya, I'm sure Tanya has many mistakes that I made. But one was in one of my scenes on the airplane, I had my protagonist drinking white zin, but it was 1966. But I wanted her to be drinking white zin for the white, for the purity of it, and the zin for sin. And I liked the juxtaposition of those thoughts, purity and sin. And I was scolded by someone who said, "Do you know white zin wasn't invented until 1970 by Sutter, blah, blah, blah." So I changed it. And then later on in the book, I had a character order champagne in a coupe, which apparently was the only way champagne was served until the flute was invented, which was many years later. So
Yeah.
they're both alcoholic.
It's quite interesting how a number of readers, particularly about certain things, are very concerned. And it's geography, wine, guns. If you make mistakes, they will let you know it. So I'll just share one quick one of mine that turned into an interesting story, which was I got an email, and I correspond a lot with my readers, and got an email from one woman. In Not So Dead, I make a reference to 3 Mile Island being in central Pennsylvania, or not in central, near Pittsburgh. And she wrote me to correct me and said, 3 Mile Island is in Pennsylvania, but it's not near Pittsburgh. It's in the middle of Pennsylvania. Okay. So I wrote her back and I said, well, let me tell you my 3 Mile Island story. And when 3 Mile Island happened, before some of you were born, a mushroom, not a mushroom cloud, but a cloud of nuclear radioactive material was emitted from 3 Mile Island and was moving east over New Jersey, where I live. And my wife, Amy, of many years, was pregnant with our first son at that time. And we were so concerned, I put her on a plane to go stay with a friend in Cambridge, Tanya. So I wrote this story, and the woman wrote me back and she said, I have a story for you about 3 Mile Island. She said, Judd, the day before 3 Mile Island happened, I got in a car accident and I was in a coma for 2 weeks. And she said, my husband was sitting in the room for 2 weeks watching CNN and all of the news about 3 Mile Island. And you know how they say when people are in a coma, they hear what's going on? Mm-hmm. She said, when I woke up from the coma, I knew all about 3 Mile Island, which I thought was really interesting. So sometimes the most interesting things come from mistakes, I find, things going wrong. Like when you get lost on a trip somewhere, those are the things you remember, right? You know, when you get where you're going the way you intended, there's no story in that. The story is when things go wrong or screwy. So Steve and Bob, do you have any to share?
I have one. It's kind of a funny one. I got a call from a coach who had read, a baseball coach who had read this vignette in the book when I had batted against Jim Palmer in high school, and he struck me out. He was a Hall of Fame pitcher for the Orioles. And I said he was a lefty. And he goes, he was not a lefty, he was a righty. And I thought, Jesus, all I remember is the ball just like coming in to hit me. And I think it just blanked it out somehow. But, you know, other than writing the book, the mistake of writing the book, there were a few others, I got a call from a friend I did a hitchhiking story in Mexico. And, I actually juxtaposed 2 hitchhiking experiences that I had with that. So, you know, there are probably way more mistakes than I'll ever find out.
How about you, Bob?
I'm proud to say nothing of that nature. I have the mistakes I've made are more damning and more consequential. And I wish that I'll give you, this is more a public, I had a nonfiction book published a number of years ago, Linda might be interested, about a teacher. It's a true story of a dramatic incident in a classroom in Alaska, and was sort of cajoled by the publisher into writing like a forward. And I regret, and it got published that way, and I regret it because it's a good story that a reader should be able to open the book and start with what happens. And this is not a direct answer, but there are regrets more than Jim Palmer being left-handed. And you could have fooled me, Steve.
Well, it goes to the faultiness of memory, which is a whole other subject that can be pretty fascinating.
What is interesting is what readers, and I'm sure it's all across the gamut, what readers will discover about an alleged mistake and say, that's it, this author has no credibility, and what they'll forgive and say, this is flowing, screw it, it works. And I don't know, my guess is readers fall into both those categories and even additional categories.
Well, if you're like me and you're a little bit OCD and you come across a typo in a book, it takes you out of the story. Well, if you're a baseball fanatic or a wine connoisseur or a gun person, and something hits you the wrong way, it might take you out of the story.
Well, and if you're predisposed to suspect that the author is in some sort of con relationship, which most of us are, you don't want that cover to be blown, and that's what.
That's a good point. Flesh that out a little bit, Bob. What do you mean by a con relationship?
Well, because I mean, it would vary, book to book and author to author, but uh, the way I'll answer it, I suspect, is the way most of us would answer, which is, there's something that, unless it is, well, I mean, Steve's written not a memoir, but a memoir of his career. That's different. In fiction, that things are being fictionalized, and as a reader, you put up with it happily, unless you're made to somehow be suspicious or awkward in in the trust that you're granting the author. I mean, I'm not saying it well, but I think there is that, there is that relationship, and you don't want a reader to start scratching their head and looking too closely at what's going on.
Yeah, well, I would even build on what you're saying and take it further and say fiction is a bit of a magic trick. You are
better word than a con job.
Yeah, you are creating an illusion of something that seems real, and if we're lucky enough to do it well, it's so convincing that that the reader will be immersed in that world and that story. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a very lovable character in my first book who was a detective who happened to be a lesbian and a badass. And she was assassinated in a later book. Well, I got such grief from both friends and readers that I killed off such a character. And I actually was talking in front of a book club, and they really got on my case about it. And and I said, I know, I really felt bad about it too. I was grieving too for the loss of that character. So if your fiction's effective, they'll fall in love with some characters. And some of these characters, we asked the question at the beginning, where they come from. And in one case with Not So Dead, 2/3 of the way through the book, I don't know where she came from, but there's a character named Michelle Hadar who was a Syrian immigrant at MIT, very bright, who gets kind of extorted by our villain to cooperate and help him with his task. And as I fleshed out her character and her strength and her dealing with moral dilemmas, I really fell in love with that character. So when the book was over, I felt for her and for Sam, my main character, I owed it to them to write the next book. They became so human to me that I couldn't leave them at that point. Let me ask you this question. I know in big part, we write to entertain our readers, but also, do you have a message underneath that you're trying to convey? And I'll say specifically in the books we talked about, in Third and Long and Against the Glass and in Gallery Confidential, is there a message behind the illusion and the entertainment?
Well, in my book, there definitely is. I'm sorry, did I step on somebody's toe?
No, go ahead.
Yes, it's about the way women experience the world, especially in that period of history that I wrote about. And the world does very often seem to be harder for women to navigate than men, for many reasons, and some of them biological, I think. And in my earlier years, I read just about everything. A Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, The Feminine Mystique, Camille Paglia. I mean, I just read everything. So maybe that influenced me to feel that things were different, but it seemed I was really experiencing things differently. For one example, when I was teaching, I was first told, and this was like in the 1970, I was told, oh no, you can't wear pants. You have to wear a skirt or a dress every day. You're not allowed to wear pants or jeans or slacks or trousers. And then when I got pregnant, the principal told me, well, when you start to show, you're going to have to take a leave. Like, how is that fair? That because you're a woman, you can't continue to earn a living. And I was teaching in an all-girls high school. And I brought it to my union, and my union said, no way, you're not leaving if you don't want to. You stay until you want to leave. And I stayed until the day before my son was born.
Good for you. Good for you.
But
How about
things
some-
like that. I mean, men don't have to experience those things. That's what I mean.
Okay, you got us on the defensive now, Linda.
So no, I don't mean to put you on I have some fabulous men in my book. They're such great men.
No,
But-
and actually, in my latest book, both the protagonist and the two villains are women. So
Oh, the villains are women.
both, yeah, and the hero, the heroine. How about you, Bob? Message?
Well, in Third and Long, message, as we all know, is a weighty term. So let me just say the idea that was at the center of it, and maybe it's a message, was the hero, if you will, in the book is someone about whom the community that he is embraced by has a question, which is, if he's done everything he said he would do to benefit us, but is not the person we thought he was, what conclusion do we reach? And that's at the heart of the book. And so I don't know if it's answering that question, however you answer it, would be the message, but people answer it differently.
Interesting.
That is interesting. In the book of Carol Bluestein's that I just read, a similar question is there about what if good people do bad things? It's somewhat related.
I can answer that one. They're bad.
Well, you have to read her book to see that that's probably true. Hey, Stephen, how about you?
Well, I
any
think
message?
the underlying theme is perseverance and, finding a career that you love. And Linda, women come off very well in the art world. I hired way more women than men over the years, and they thrive. I think some of my most successful art consultants were women.
Well, yes, they should.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but yeah, I think just perseverance, like when I show so many career pratfalls, just to be able to get up and shake yourself off and keep on going.
Yeah, I think your
That
book
would be
really
true for
demonstrates that well. And an extra plug for women in that my father died when I was a year old, and my mother who had been a 50s housewife, was forced to go to work with 3 young children, support them and bring them up. And my mother was the greatest hero in my life and role model for perseverance, because she sweated it out. It was a struggle financially and emotionally and it was her second husband that had died. She had 2. The first one died at 29, the second one at 49. It was pretty tough. So when I was in business, I was the first one to hire women as salespeople. The first one was actually my wife, Amy, who within a month became #1 out of 99 salespeople. So, Linda, your title is Against the Glass, which is relevant to breaking the glass, right?
Yes,
And
the
my,
glass
my,
ceiling.
my mother was the first female stockbroker in New Jersey. She decided when she was going to go to work, she wasn't going to just be a clerk. She was going to pursue a dream, which she had, which was to become a stockbroker.
And I loved your little story, permission slip, about your mother. That
about
was
my
very,
mother.
very poignant.
Well,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
do a quick feminist plug for the book.
Oh, I've got everybody on women's.
Well, that I'm just concluding and may someday get published, which is, it begins with the following setup. A divorced suburban women, mother of two, attends a kind of aimless cocktail party, goes home disgruntled, turns on the TV, and on the TV is a talk show where a neoconservative pundit is denouncing the moral failings of liberated women of the late 60s and early 70s. 20 years earlier, that pundit had been her lover in a hippie commune in Mass.
Wow.
It goes back.
That's quite a setup. And
May
I
you
will
someday be able to read it.
What's the title? Working title?
The work. Steve asked me that. I'm Casa Roja, or I've been thinking of using the title Casa Roja in its time. So one of those two.
Oh, okay, good.
That being the name of the commune. The commune.
Looking forward to it.
Well,
yeah, and I'll quickly answer that question about messages too, which is I always enjoyed books that I read a lot of fiction, multiple genres, and I always enjoyed the ones where I felt I learned something plus enjoyed the story. So in my books, I try and have things that are interesting and quirky that people don't know about. And then also, maybe because I graduated with a degree in philosophy, I can't help but weave in things. So, and when I spoke to this first book club, unsolicited, the woman who ran it said, "Oh, I want to read out a passage from your book." And the one she picked had nothing to do with the thriller plot. It was Sam, the main character, and Al, the detective, are on the deck of a boat under very tough circumstances. And Sam talks about the 3 keys to happiness. You want to know what he says?
Of course.
Yeah, and the 3 keys to happiness, as per Sam, is having something to do, having something to look forward to, and having somebody to love. And that was something I had picked up somewhere, and I found it just resonated with me. I thought that was, obviously there's much more to talk about in that area, but that caught that reader out of the whole book as something that, as a message that was woven into the story that she wanted to share. There's actually some good active chat going on from Jeff with questions like, Janet's from Israel. Janet, he asked, "Where are you in Israel?" You want to share that with us? Unmute yourself.
I'm in Ra'anana, which is about 15 miles northeast of Tel Aviv.
Well, and it's late at night there. It's about midnight, isn't it?
No, it's close on 12:30.
Well, thank you for staying up to join us here.
I live in my own time zone.
And I don't know if you were all on before, but Steve and Maier is in Hawaii, so that's the other side of the globe. And Bob Katz is in Massachusetts, and Linda is in the Panhandle of Florida.
I was saying that I grew up in Boston.
So you've got, there's a lot of Boston roots here. I lived there for a few years, and on the call, you probably can't see them, but all these authors know Steve Bennett, who is the founder of Author Bites and has done websites for, I think, most of us authors here. And Audrey Bennett, his daughter and ACE project manager, is on the call as well. So we're glad to have them here too. All right, so another question for you. What was your, maybe not the favorite, but a favorite or influential book on you when you were growing up as a kid? Maybe the first book you read or one that really stuck with you.
Oh, I have one right here. Stories That Never Grow Old. I don't know if you can see it.
And tell it,
Somebody gave this to me as a gift when I was a very little girl.
and tell us about why that meant, what that meant to you.
Because it was my first book. I had never owned a book. So when somebody gave me this book, it just opened my eyes. And after that, I had to learn to read it because I was young. But, you know, my parents read it to me. But then I discovered the library. And once I discovered the library, that was a whole world. And I used to, as a little girl in Manhattan, used to walk to the library all by myself. And I would pass this gauntlet of trucks going, and 18-wheelers going in and out of garages on my block, and make it somehow unscathed to the library. So that opened my eyes.
Great. How about you, Bob, Steve?
Well, I can say with me, I've been scratching my head, and I stand naked before this group saying, I can't think of, I read a lot, but there was nothing, nothing that was a profound influence. Next time I'll have a better answer.
Okay.
And it will be fiction.
I will tell you that before maybe the age of 10, I was a reluctant reader. I think I was a slow reader. I'm still a slow reader. And I didn't read for pleasure until I stumbled into a bookstore. I always like to look in bookstores. And I picked up, with my own allowance money, a paperback copy of Ian Fleming's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I didn't know that books could be that much fun and entertaining until I read James Bond. And of course, I went on to read several books. And as I said, I read multiple genres. So the other kind of breakthrough for me was in college, reading Plato in the original Greek. I learned Greek, ancient Greek, and that opened up a whole universe of thought and experience that I really was unaware of. Stephen, how about you? Any kids' book experiences?
Well, besides Dick and Jane, and I think if they had named Spot Snoopy, it would have been better. I'm going to say Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, just because later on, when you read the Elements of Style, Scrunk and White, it's a very impactful, slim little volume that helped a lot.
Yeah, I see Jeff raising his arms and cheering over there for those books. Good. And another question that I get asked often, and I'd love to hear your answers on it, and that is, just take a couple of minutes and describe some of the key parts of your writing process. Do you write every day? Is there a time of day you write? Do you write from outlines? Just give us a little bit of that. We'll take a couple of minutes each, and then we're going to have our trivia question for our author book giveaway. So share a little bit of your process with us.
All right, I'll go first. When I'm writing, when I've gathered all my material and now I want to see what I've got, I try to wake up very early, like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and not let any distractions in. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to look at the computer. I just want to wake up with the mind I had while I was sleeping and think about what I've got in front of me and how I'm going to meld it all together. And I have a and I work until about noon or when my dog absolutely positively needs to go out. So, and he wants to go out now. But I work on paper. I just take sheets of plain typing paper and I divide them in sections and I put like ideas, I sort ideas that way, and eventually get around to creating sentences and paragraphs, but that's a long way off. It's a very, very, very slow, tedious process. And it took me probably 6 or 7 years of that process to write Against the Glass. It was very slow. And I rewrote the book 4 times.
Well, the next one will be quicker.
Oh, yes, much faster. Yes. I don't know that I'll be that slow about it.
How about you, Bob, Stephen?
I'll take it, Stephen.
For you, man. You know, I am actually a night person, and I like to write in the evenings. I come alive at that time. I do keep a pad by my bed, and I come up with ideas. I write them down.
It's the time zone difference, Stephen. It's the time zone difference. That's why
yeah, exactly. I'm also, you know, like you talk about Jung. I love Carl Jung and the whole Bollinger series and Dreams, Memories, and Reflections. A lot of what he wrote, and I understand, you know, that connection to that part. But you know, in this little book that I wrote, it's a little more of a pastiche of, you know, sort of mosaic of things and short stories that I tried to have a hook on each little section. I think even short stories sort of short changes how brief these are. I like to say it's more Twitter than Tolstoy, but you know, I just come up with, I think Rilke said it best, you know, the art of writing is the art of applying the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair. And I do think that it's like a muscle that you build, and the more that you write, the better you get at it. But it's rewriting, and you know, Hemingway rewrote, you know, Old Man and the Sea 69 times, you know, and they asked him why, and he said it's the words, you know, and I did try to hone it down. I did try to, and you know, Tanya Lee helped a lot with that, and she gave me some really good direction in terms of like, don't include that chapter. Yeah, but yeah, it's just a process of doing it, you know, more than anything else.
Great. Hey, but Bob, what about you?
You know, I would like to say I'm regular and disciplined, and I aspire to be that, but I fail regularly for lifestyle reasons. I think any writer knows that when you're feeling good about what you're doing, it's easier to be regular and disciplined. And when you're skeptical about what you're working on, it becomes more laborious. The only things that I think I've learned that I will try forever to abide by is to have a sense of the ending and have a sense of an ending that makes me feel positive about the direction I'm going. That you want the idea that you're leading a reader to somewhere that's going to be satisfying. I'm not saying a happy ending necessarily, but is empowering to me as a writer. And the times where I've written and failed, it's because in retrospect now, I can see where I'd not, the ending I was aiming for was a flawed ending. And I knew that on some, you know, subconscious level throughout. So
interesting. Yeah. I will share with you that my favorite time to write is in the mornings. And it may be because I'm a morning person, but I find that I can be more creative in the morning. And after I did that and I started writing and realized that where are these stories coming from? And you begin to realize that they're not coming from your conscious mind. Somehow these characters and plots are coming from somewhere deep inside. I'm a Jung fan also, Stephen, so I relate to that. But And then I heard Walter Mosley, a famous author, speak, and he said he writes in the morning because it's closer to his dreams. And I thought, well, that really resonates with me. And like Linda, I don't collect items, but I collect ideas and throw them into what Lee Child calls my refrigerator. I have a program, and any ideas, articles, clips, I throw them in the refrigerator. And then when I'm writing, I pull these things out of the refrigerator when they make sense to write. And I won't take time with it now, but we could have an extended discussion about different forms of outlining. And Bob, you kind of hit on it, and that your ending. When I wrote Not So Dead, I didn't know the ending. And it evolved as I got into the story. But as I did my other books, I sort of had an idea of the ending. But it was Joyce Carol Oates who said something very interesting about not being too detailed in your outline, in that if you're writing, when you're writing is an adventure for you, that is unexpected, surprising things happen when you're writing, they will be equally surprising and exciting for your readers. And I thought that was a very interesting and insightful remark about writing. So we promised to keep this about an hour, and we hit that mark. So I'm going to ask our authors, since those of you who have stuck it out might enjoy participating in this, we'll do our little trivia question giveaway. And then if any of you want to stick around beyond that for 10, 15 minutes and ask questions unmuted, we'll be happy to do that as well. So Linda, why don't you start us off with a trivia question, and I will be watching the chat, and maybe you can as well, to see who gets the answer right. Click the chat. So related to Against the Glass, which I have here, give us a good trivia question.
When, as I said, I like to go places and collect things, and I went to Paris and I visited the Ritz. I did not stay at the Ritz, but I visited. And I bumped into a very famous American actor. And he evolved into an important character in my book, not as the American actor, but as the character in my book who was transformed. It was just a seed for the person I created, the character I created. So I wonder if anybody could guess who that very handsome American actor was.
You might need to give us a little more of a hint too, like a movie that person may have starred in or something.
He should have won the Oscar for Cabaret.
Okay, we'll let that hang out there, and we'll watch the chat for a possible winner. How about you, Stephen? Give us a trivia question that relates to Gallery Confidential.
Well, I'll make it really easy. I put up this print of a painting that I did back in 1993 called Hawaiian Gothic Vacation. Who was this a pastiche of? Who is this parodying? What famous American author is that parodying? I try to make it really easy because I'm thinking that a lot of people probably didn't read the book, but they saw the cover.
Okay, good. All right, good one. All right, so already Allison Wyden answered Joel Grey. Is she correct?
No, 3 people answered Joel Grey.
Yes. But the first one is going to win your book. So Allison, if you
a very handsome, sexy American actor.
Yes, that's correct. So Allison, if you send a email to linda@lindahabib.com with your address, she will send you a copy.
No, it's not. It's not Joel Grey.
Oh, it's not Joel Gray.
No,
Oh,
and there are
wow.
3 Joel Gray answers, and it's not.
It's not Joel Gray. All right, well, then we'll hold out for another one. And we're also looking, we got a Michael York, no. Yes, no, I see Linda's Habib is, Linda, Michael York, no.
He can't remember his name.
Okay, and with Stephen, what are we looking for? The artist who painted the original of that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, okay.
the artist that I parodied in that,
Okay.
which is the cover of the book, more or less.
All right, and we're gonna throw all these out here at once, and if we get a correct answer,
That's it.
Grant Wood painted
Got it.
American Gothic from Janet. So Janet, if you,
I'm sending it to Israel.
I guess you're gonna have to.
I can give you an address in the States if it makes a difference.
Oh, well, that would help. Yeah.
Whatever is best for you. I don't mind sending it wherever you want it.
And Janet, I think I have your address, but no, I have your email. But Janet, if you would just email me your address, I will pass it on to Stephen. You will get his book. Bob, you got one for us?
Sure. To paraphrase the introduction you gave of the book, so Third and Long is about a sports mad Midwest factory town that's in desperate need of a desperation play. A few years before I wrote the novel, I happened to be traveling through the Ohio River Valley and stopped in a town that made such a strong impression on me that both the town and the famous football coach, who it turned out was born and raised there, both are referenced strongly in my novel. Can someone name, either the town and or the coach?
And the town is in Ohio.
The town is in Ohio.
And the
On the
coach
river.
and the coach coached an Ohio-related football team.
Who said that?
I'm asking that.
Oh, the answer is not. I don't know the.
You
That's
don't know
a
the
trivia
answer.
question I don't know the answer to.
All right, we got a Cincinnati up there. I don't know if that's it, but
No.
I'm looking in the chat.
And
Okay.
yeah.
We'll wait and see.
But
what
that is on
happens.
the river, so don't stop now.
Okay, keep guessing. And I will, I asked this question last month, but only one or two of you might have been there. And if you were, don't answer. But I made reference in Still Not Dead to a 1950s movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And if you can name either an actor or a screenwriter or anything related to that movie. And last month I said nobody won, but in fact, one of the people who attended quoted in alien language what the robot said. And so he ultimately won the book. So if you know something about The Day the Earth Stood Still and can put it in the chat, we'll pick up on that. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. And at this point, I would open this up to questions. Anyone who wants to unmute themselves and ask any or all the authors a question, please feel free to do that.
Nobody has my answer right. And I thought it was so easy.
Not yet. Just like
Not yet. Nobody has it right yet. So
We'll
they have
wait.
other chances to guess.
Yes, you can keep guessing. And the Ohio coach we're looking for, and The Day the Earth Stood Still as well. Michael Rennie, Jeff, you are correct. Send me your snail mail address and I will send you a signed copy of Still Not Dead. Michael Rennie starred in it. And the director, Wiseman, even though it sounds like it's a B movie, it is a movie with a big message. And it is also, Wiseman directed The Sound of Music, as well as West Side Story. So he was a serious director. Yes, okay. So any questions from anyone there, just unmute yourself and let's hear a question, any or all of the authors. Do we have any? Evie, you must have a question. Just unmute yourself.
Okay, so last year, I think it was, I read The Plot. Did any of you read that?
No.
Anybody? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right. Anyway, it's about a story of a professor, and kind of a new young English professor in a college, and he meets a student in the bar one night, and the guy tells him a plot, right? And then it turns out, I don't want to ruin this if you want to read this, but anyway, he steals the plot. So it's quite it is kind of an interesting book. And so my question to you all is, with all the things that have been written in history, right? All the different slants, all the different ways of telling a story and whatever. Do you ever worry about that you're going to tell, a story that's too much like somebody else's?
Well, I like the quote that I heard, and I don't know where it came from, that every story has been already told, but it is the way you tell it and the spin you put on it. It makes it fresh and new and interesting.
Right.
And so I've gotten over pretending that I've invented something absolutely brand new. But I'd like to think that the way I tell the story is different and engaging. And I mean, how many times have we all seen or read Boy Meets Girl, boy argues with girl, boy, they break up, and they get back together again. I mean, that story is universal. Well, so are some of the others, I'm sure, that we've written. Anyone else want to take that question?
Just add to it that there's just a finite number of plots. I mean, I've heard as few as 7, but I've never been able to count, so I'm not sure. But you're right. Stories, the way you tell them is really what might captivate people.
And there are only 26 letters in the alphabet. Look
That's
what
true.
happens with them.
Yeah, and one of my favorite books on writing is called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. And
Yes.
he identifies about a dozen movie plots that you can put any movie that you've seen into one of these buckets. But there's a reason some of them win Oscars and are iconic and others are not. By the way, which he says nobody really figures out until the movie comes out. Colleen, I know you've got a question. You've got to ask us one too. Why don't you unmute and jump in?
Linda, I too am a collector of ephemera and things and objects, and I would love to know more of certain things that you have that you absolutely love in your collection.
Oh, yes, I've got some things right here that are, let's see. I have got, in my story, there is mention of a family tradition of passing down a coin, the Janus coin. And I actually have here a 2,000-year-old coin, Roman coin, that's even clipped because I guess the Romans needed more of whatever this is. And then I got a more recent version of this coin as a necklace. So at least you can see Janus, the two-faced god, looking forward and looking backward, which is kind of a theme of my book as well. And I have a little coin from the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and it's a euro, a 10-cent euro. I don't know if you can, I made this into a necklace too. And it has the face of, I don't know if you can see it there, the face of Venus from this book. Well, from The Birth of Venus. I've got so many versions of The Birth of Venus from this painting,
Oh, wow.
which is, well, this one was a birthday card because everybody knows how I love it, but it's Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Stephen, you're probably familiar with this.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to the Uffizi just to see that painting. And it plays a role in my novel as well. And all these little trinkets, you know, I kind of hold on to them and they give me energy. But I have loads of things. I have magazines from the time period that I wrote about. I found out you could order magazines from 1970, 1971. So I ordered them.
Where
So
do you order those from? That's fascinating to know.
There's a company, I can't remember the name of it now. I might be able to look it up, but I Googled a magazine from 1970, a Time magazine, a Life magazine. And I have a couple of them here. Well,
You can order back issues from almost any publication by contacting them too. The New York Times, I know you can get
is
everything.
a Look magazine. And this one features the author of that little book, Ovum Humanum. And this was 35 cents in May 18th, 1971. And it talks about the test tube baby coming on the horizon. Didn't really come until 78, I think. And then this one is an old Cosmo,
Mhm.
50 cents in February 1966. So I thought these were fun to have and look at the ads and look at the stories, and they were pretty amazing. But I've got collections of things everywhere. I've got things everywhere.
Good, good.
I hope that answers your question. I'll try to figure out how I got these magazines other than just Googling them. Let me just see something here.
Yeah, and if you let me know after, Linda, and I will.
Yeah, and then I could let Charlie know and he could let you know.
I'll forward it to Colleen. Also, Bob, I got a Longview, Ohio here in the chat. Is that the town?
Well, I'd like to, that's just the name. I commend anyone for trying. That's the fictionalized. My question was inarticulate in that it's the real name of the town, the fictional town Longview in the book is derived from. So
I see.
I'm happy to award that person, you know.
Yeah, and we see a Sandusky here also.
No, but you know, all neither are right. I don't know how.
Well, we'll save
know
the
either.
chat. We'll save the chat and we'll track it down. And Linda, there's been a number of answers you can check out.
I know
there.
when they're all wrong. Somebody asked for further clue, and I know this one will just blow it out of the water. Everybody's going to
Go
know
ahead.
the answer. Pretty Woman.
I actually have to leave in a minute here. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we're gonna wrap it up. There is the first Richard Gere came from Allison Wyden. So Allison,
Yes, Richard Gere is the actor I literally bumped into, and we were alone in the Ritz basement. Well, not the basement, actually. It was the connection between the women's spa and the men's
This
spa.
is how all the lawsuits start.
Yeah, so
okay, so I've got
I went to shake his hand and he's, oh, I said, that's okay.
Allison got East Liverpool, Ohio is accurate.
Who got it? Allison got it also?
Yeah.
All right, well then, Allison, you need to email us. Actually, if you email Charlie at charleslevin.com, I will get the address to both Linda and Bob.
Yes, Heather B.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope this was entertaining and enlightening session for you. I know we had a good time. Jeff, thanks for coming again. And Tanya, you corrected many of my things. Janet, I love that you stuck with us, and Colleen, and and Evie and other friends, thank you so much for coming, and we'll bid you adieu.
You guys are such an eclectic group, but thank you all very much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.